Essentially, they're slowly moving into the Far Eastern waters. To the Japanese, trade with the Europeans, which might provide guns and gold, needs to be limited and controlled. Japanese rulers regard Christianity as an instrument of foreign ambitions and European imperialism. Hence, priests are often excluded. Those that were brought in were often punished or expelled. Portuguese, Spanish, Dutch sailors, traders, merchants are closely watched by the Japanese. Japanese feudalism shuts out the outside world. This is known as sakuku, the closed society, the closed country. The Japanese control all factors that might threaten political stability, and as I mentioned, ban priests and traders, with only a few exceptions. Trade and missionary work activity were considered inseparable at this point in time. Japan has a strong fear of the subversive power and influence of Christianity, and essentially feel that the conversion to Christianity is essentially the first step towards conquest. The priest demands absolute loyalty and obedience from converts, and the converts must choose between Christ and their rulers or shoguns. So Christianity is considered subversive by the Japanese. This seclusion is the ancient ancestral law. Christianity is a challenge to tradition. But advances in European science, technology, this new wave of European expansion, this growth of the European industry, this European search for new markets, make it virtually impossible for Japan to be left alone forever. Xavier lands in Japan on the Feast of the Assumption at a place called Kagoshima. This is an island of the Kyushu province. It's really a bad time to arrive. Japan is in a state of civil war. The land is divided into 60 kingdoms, and the many feudal lords are fighting with each other. Europeans had actually arrived in Japan 6 years earlier via a shipwrecked Portuguese vessel. But no Westerner has ventured inland. All right, Xavier is not molested at Kagoshima, and the local lord greets him generously. The shogun at first thinks that Xavier's Christianity is in fact a form of new Buddhism, and gives Francis permission to preach to the people. Xavier quickly learns Japanese and translates a simple account of Christian teachings and recites it to any and all who will listen to him. Xavier encounters some resistance from the Buddhist monks and nobility because he's dressed in black robes. He goes shoeless. He doesn't wear shoes. Many of the Japanese people think he is strange. They laugh at him. They jeer at him. They actually throw stones at him. Yet he manages to get 100 converts in 12 months. The authorities begin to get suspicious and forbid any further teaching or preaching. Xavier leaves Anjiro / Paul in charge of the new converts and decides to push further inland with his other companions. He pushes further into the heart of Japan, towards Hirado, north of Nagasaki. En route, Xavier visits the fortress of Ishiku and manages to convert the ruler's wife and steward, among others. Xavier soon pushes on. After converting the local baron's wife, he pushes on and leaves the steward in charge of the new converts. Now, 12 years later, a Jesuit lay brother, Luis de Almeida, finds these isolated converts still retaining their fervor and faithfulness. He does a very good job. Xavier does a very good job. Now, at Hirado, Xavier has more success in just a few weeks than he had all year at Kagoshima. Francis leaves the converts to Father de Torres and goes with Brother Fernandez to Yagamuchi in Honshu. This is in the Honshu province. Xavier preaches in public, but the missionaries make no impression and are treated with scorn by the public. His objective is now Kyoto, the chief city of Japan. The missionaries suffer much on the road to Kyoto. It's very difficult terrain. It's filled with mountains. It's cold. It's in the middle of December. There's heavy rains. There's ice. There's snow. There's a series of hostile villages on the long, hard journey that takes Francis 4 months. Now, Xavier manages to procure an audience with the Mikado, the emperor, the puppet ruler of the shoguns. But Francis must pay money in order to see the emperor. Francis waits for days to see the Mikado and soon learns the truth. The emperor is a ruler in name only. He's a figurehead who has no real power outside of Kyoto. There's also civil strife that fills the city. Xavier finds it impossible to do any good there. He stays a fortnight, then returns to Yagamuchi. Evangelical poverty does not seem to have the same appeal in Japan that it has in India. And a sense of failure sets in. But Xavier has an epiphany. He will now change his methods. He will now wear his best clothes, his finest cloak and cape, and call himself an ambassador and wear a royal insignia. Xavier realizes that mixing with the poor is not the best way to bring Christianity to a sophisticated culture like Japan. Francis now goes back to the palace of the Lord, the Duke of Negushi. His companions are now his attendants. They're all dressed in their finest garments. And he presents himself as a representative of Spain and Portugal and brings with him diplomatic letters and presents, gifts for the ruler, for the Duke, a musical box, a clock, a pair of spectacles. These gifts are provided by the authorities in India. The ruler receives the gifts with delight. Francis slows down. He talks about many subjects: mathematics, astronomy, geography, comets. Conversation is the first step towards conversion. He conforms to Japanese ways of behavior. Xavier pleases the ruler, who essentially gives him protection and gives him permission to continue his missionary activities. Francis now preaches with a renewed vigor and baptizes many thousands in the city. He is now very different than the other missionaries of his time. The other missionaries equate Christianity with becoming European. A convert must first learn to appreciate art, European literature, European law. Essentially, they must become European. Japan, to Francis, is proof that a person can become Christian outside of European culture. Authentic, non-European Christians. Xavier, his new method, meets with great success. Many nobles become Christian and become friends to Xavier. Francis refers to Buddhist writings as scriptures. He has respect for Buddhism, respect for Hinduism, respect for the Islamic faith, and uses Buddhism, uses Buddhist words to describe God, to describe heaven, to describe angels. These fundamental translations go into the very soul of the Japanese cultural life. From contacts with learned Buddhist monks, Xavier hears of another more ancient country and culture that the Japanese themselves hold in great regard and respect. Xavier is now eager to go to China. China is the celestial